8.8 is on solid waste disposal. Solid waste is a fancy name for trash. It's any discarded material that is not a liquid or gas. It can be generated in all sorts of places, but the greatest component of all these places is paper, followed by then food waste and then yard trimmings and plastics. Hazardous waste is the name that we give to anything that you probably shouldn't eat or drink or touch. Things like oil, batteries, paints, harmful chemicals, items that if you throw in the trash can have negative impacts on the health of the environment and can come back to you as well. So if you don't already, I would highly encourage you to find places to properly dispose of these items in your community. These are not things you just want to just dump in the garbage can or down the drain, or especially not, just on the ground. Please find safe places to get rid of these. The Resource Conservation and Recovery Act is a law that you need to know about for this class, but it's also good to know, for life. The Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, or RCRA, because that's a lot to say, is a law that mandates the generator of a product to be responsible for that product's impact on the environment from cradle to grave. So what that means is from its production, the mining of the raw minerals, like production of that material, the transfer of that material, to then its eventual disposal. And they have to do an analysis on every step and determine what impact it can have, and then put in a plan to minimize that impact. So ideally, it would produce no impact, but it does make them responsible if there is something that happens. Electronic waste is the name given to all of our old cell phones and televisions and computers. There's a lot of stuff in these electronics that has a negative impact on the environment. So along with hazardous waste, if you have old electronic devices, please don't just toss them in the garbage. There's more than likely some sort of collection system in place in your community that you can take them to. Typically for a lot of these it's free or very cheap, and at the very least it's much better than going into the trash can, so please don't do that. Thank you. Landfills are where we put our trash. So a big advantage of landfills is it puts all of our trash in one location. Downside, landfills have the potential to contaminate groundwater due to something called leachate. Leachate is a fancy word for trash juice. So when you get rain or other sources of water percolating down into the garbage, it's going to dissolve anything it comes into contact with that's water soluble. This can include toxic chemicals. And then if it continues to percolate into the ground with those dissolved toxic chemicals, it can get into the groundwater. Another issue is the release of harmful gases such as methane. Methane results from the anaerobic decomposition of organic material. And as you can see, with this trash, we compact it and compact it and compact it so that we can fit more stuff in it, but there's no airflow whatsoever. So we have anaerobic decomposition taking place, so therefore we have methane being produced. So what we'll do in sanitary landfills, which is typically what you'll find, at least in industrialized communities, they have a liner put into place, typically 2 or more liners, that are impenetrable to water. So they'll use clay or plastic or both, and that way that leachate that pools at the bottom, it can't get into the groundwater. They'll also have a leachate collection system taking place where they'll suck up that leachate and then take it to a treatment plant, someplace to store it where it definitely can't get into the groundwater. They'll also have methane gas collection systems, and this will either be burned right away, or they can take that methane and use it to generate electricity. To minimize the amount of trash going into a landfill, and therefore make it last longer, we can incinerate it. So they'll burn the waste at really high temperatures and it reduces the volume. However, it does release air pollution and some pollutants that are really, really bad, like dioxin. If you recall from the last video on POPs, dioxin is persistent organic pollutant. So we don't want this floating around in the environment. Not all trash makes it to the landfill. Some places just don't have sanitary landfill in place, or, let's be real, people are lazy. And if you're told that you can't take this certain trash and put it in the trash can, it's pretty easy just to, dispose of it. But there is no way. It's going to have an impact somewhere, even if it's not on you. So with these open pits, we have issues of that leachate and methane, and also issues that we don't really think about. Like, for instance, rubber tires can become breeding grounds for mosquitoes that can spread disease. So in places like with malaria, that can be a factor in its ability to spread. Some countries may also dispose of their waste by just dumping it into the ocean. And it has, over time, accumulated in large currents. So we have like giant floating islands of trash, and that can be harmful to wildlife that entangles it or gets entangled in it. It can ingest it, maybe not directly, but those plastics, for example, can break down into tiny, tiny microplastics. And microplastics, fun fact, not really that fun, can bioaccumulate and therefore biomagnify. And so it's another issue with eating large fish. Large fish have been found to have microplastics in them, or a lot of microplastics. They found it in small fish too, but I'm saying it's going to be worse in larger fish because of that whole biomagnification thing. Okay, since we're talking about waste and hazardous waste, it's a good time to talk to you about Love Canal. So this is a really important case study in environmental science, so you wanna know it. So between 1942 and 1953, there was a chemical company called Hooker Chemical Company that used this abandoned canal site to dispose of their... Stop that. Okay, I was playing with the cord. They used this abandoned canal project to dispose of toxic chemicals. So that included 12 known carcinogens and all 21,000 tons of their toxic chemicals. Then they just kind of capped it, so they sealed it off, and put the lid on it, and sold it to the Niagara Falls School Board with the caveat that they are no longer responsible for this toxic chemical stuff. But hey, they did tell them, we put a lot of toxic chemicals in here. And they're like, oh, okay. So let's just do the most logical thing and build neighborhoods on it and schools. And surely that's fine, right? Nothing will go wrong. That's not the case. I don't know if you figured that out. So in the 1970s, this all came into light because they were finding that people that lived here had really high cases of illness and birth defects and miscarriages. Like, why is this? Well, that's when they found out about what happened with the Hooker Chemical Company, and naturally made them pretty mad. But unfortunately, at that time, there was really no program or system put into place to deal with such a massive chemical spill. So it took a long time to fix this problem because there was just nothing in the federal budget to deal with taking an entire community and moving them someplace else. And so people had to live there for a long time. You think, like, why did they just leave? Well, remember, it's their home. It's where they grew up. It's where they work, and they've bought that home. So it's not something that you can just like pick up and leave. It's not everyone can. It has since been cleaned up. It is a safe place again. They did have to take out all that soil. It was a massive project. I would encourage you to research more into it. But it most importantly led to what's called CERCLA, or Superfund. Not Superfund, Superfund. So CERCLA stands for the Comprehensive Environmental Responsibility and Liability Act, which you probably understand right now why we call it CERCLA or Superfund. It's called Superfund because it creates this massive pot of money to spend specifically on the cleanup of hazardous waste sites, and identifies places where, where they might need to put that money, and it also identifies who should be responsible for that. So, for instance, before, the Hooker Chemical Company was not responsible because they washed their hands of it. Well, with CERCLA, that prevents it from happening. So even if you disclose it, I'm sorry, you made it. You are still responsible for it. And if they can't figure out who's responsible for it, they'll draw on that Superfund. And Superfund comes from taxes on chemical companies, petroleum companies. So anyone that could possibly maybe cause a spill, they've got to pay a tax, and that kind of goes all into that big pot of money. So we don't have an issue like with Love Canal, where it takes years and years and years. It can go into action right away. So this is a map of as of 2013 of all Superfund sites. The green is where they have cleaned them up. Yellow is there's probably some issues. Red is current Superfund sites. So I'd encourage you to go to this website and look up where you live and find a Superfund site near you. If you know another reason, then maybe it's important to know what's in your backyard. Okay, well that is it.